Absolutely delighted to welcome Rachel on our next episode of Content That Connects. Where did I meet Rachel is always going to be one of those stories that I can tell the grandkids. We're at Health Tech in Basel, and it was an amazing event. Thank you, Andrea. So once again, we had Sir Tim Peake there, yes, the astronaut. We had Amal Clooney, and then Rachel and I had a fantastic conversation over lunch, which has led to this podcast. So it brings me great joy to bring you the next episode of Content That Connects with Rachel. Rachel, over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. And I can only return the comment. You stood out among thousands of people at Health Tech Basel. So it was a delight to meet you there. To tell everyone a few words about myself, I worked in corporate for 25 years in different roles, supply chain, transformation, audit, you name it. And since 5 years, I've completely changed lives and I have my own company. What I do there is I continue to provide some consulting services when your environment is chaotic and you need structure. That's when I'm called. And I also have two digital products, one aiming at helping with stress management, and the second one aiming at, just like me, executives who want to transition and become entrepreneurs.
Wow, wow. So that's some intro, right? And we've gone to space, we've come back down to Earth with Amal Clooney, and now we're going to delve a little bit deeper. So, Rachel, when we spoke at that lunch break, I think there was a real feeling of energy that was in that room. And with everything going on in the world, this is the moment, guys, by the way, where the missiles were going off, and we got the note back from Amal Clooney saying she's not kind of flying in, right? That she was going to be beamed in like Scotty. And I think that moment of the energy that was in the room was really palpable. Okay. But one of the things I find is a lot of people are in transition. And this is something that we're going to speak about alongside my favorite topic of the year right now, which is AI, but it's like a swear word in most places, right? But I want us to look at it from a more hopeful perspective than the sort of doom mongers. And I think, you're well placed to do that with your experience. So in terms of where I thought we could potentially start is by looking at both the sort of opportunity with AI that you see and maybe sort of some of the challenges. And then maybe I'll lend some of my thinking from some of the events and some of the speaking that I've done recently. That actually nobody's really kind of worked it out just yet. So that there is a huge opportunity for the early adopters.
Early adopters and even the ones who will follow, I think it is a huge opportunity. But as everything, there's two sides to every topic. The opportunity to me is primarily professional. So I mentioned I have my own company. So typically when you are in a small business area, the capabilities that you have access to now and the amount of work a few people can achieve with support of AI is tremendous. Whether you're talking operations, customer management, customer acquisition, that's everything is in place and available to anybody now. Very accessible. So you can really boost the capabilities of your company. When it comes to bigger ones, lately I've been more involved in healthcare. And what's absolutely visible in healthcare is how AI is transforming the industry. And that's, for instance, with doctors that now have support of AI. So it goes from office work, where all the doctors could share files of patients, because interestingly, it was still very compartmentalized until recently, at least to some extent. So that's one area, but you also have surgeons who are now operating with support of AI. And these things, which are very concrete, they're not going to go away.
Yeah.
Where you have other aspects of the industry which are more bets is, for instance, quantum computers in research. So there's no question about the computing capabilities, but is the investment going to lead to a return, financial return? That's where the bet lives. And we're talking big numbers here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is the big change, right? Because so many people are vested in the short term on AI. And I find that, right? Like if you actually look at subscriptions that most people have, I can probably hazard a guess when you look at your direct debit bill that there is a chat GPT in there. There's probably a Claude now. I think Claude is, really sort of taking shape. Anthropic's another one. I do feel like we are on a bit of a gravy train. I think there is this kind of feeling that if you're not on this train, that you're going to miss out. Now, my worry is, and I said this to you as well at the lunch break, that most people, okay, know nothing about AI. And I mean that in the nicest possible way, right? Because we know people who do know about AI, and it's at a different level. So certainly for Gen AI, I think there is a real appetite, and we see that in all the sort of discussions around content creation, around other elements of design and creative work, right? But things like AlphaFold, which is one of my sort of key use cases with Google, that is the exciting part of AI for me, right? That's the moment when a company decides that they're not going to have a rocket, they're going to have a bicycle. And what I mean by that is they're not going to put loads and loads of money behind a model which has very limited use in terms of real use. And instead, they're going to focus on a very specific use case, in this case, protein folding and protein synthesis, which was what AlphaFold was about. But the reason it won the Nobel Prize, okay, in chemistry is because they open sourced it. So I think a lot more of AI can be used for things that are humane. It's in terms of the humanity aspects, right? Of if you are getting those wins, whether it's a Grok or it's an OpenAI or it's a Claude or it's whoever, we need to be spreading that joy. It should not become, like we are only going on this tech stack and everything else is dead to us. Because tomorrow morning, one of those models could outpace the other model quite significantly. I mean, like yesterday I was reading, and this is quite scary, guys, so take it as you want. Sam Altman from OpenAI decided to write a paper, okay, on what happens when we hit super intelligence with AI. This is the guy pushing for super intelligence, and he's the one who's writing about the watch outs, okay, in terms of what it looks like. So that could be something that we add into the link at the end of this podcast, because that's literally less than 12 hours old, that news. But that is the pace that we're moving at as well. And the pace feels exhausting. Have you got anything that you can help people who aren't at that sort of level of wanting to constantly be updated about AI, get enough out of it so it helps them without hindering them?
There's lots of aspects in what you've just shared. One is, first of all, unless you dedicate your days to it, it's impossible to keep up. Just impossible. And why would you? Because again, if it's your job, then you're going to spend your days on it. You'll be up to date. If you're just a normal person, curious, or just focus on what you like when you like it, you don't need to move and be first to know everything, because that's exhausting. Second element to that is one of the opportunities with AI is that it is extremely logical and extremely accessible to people. You don't need any specific training to use any software that leverages AI. You do need to use your logic, though. So if you've been to date scared about IT and you think it's reserved to a certain categories of people, AI is breaking those boundaries. You can try and interact with it. Then there's other aspects to what you've said. There's some people will never be in touch with AI because there's simply no case for them. So I'm thinking, for instance, of people who are doing events in different locations each time. Why would you think of creating a robot which would have to figure out the location, the organization, the everything in the future? There's no ROI for that. So that some jobs are here and are here to stay. So again, if you have appetite for AI, be curious, look into it, but otherwise you could be shielded. And then last part is some jobs will be impacted heavily. I've been recently talking to someone who's in translation, and she was sharing with me that every single day she interacts with someone new who tells her, oh my God, your job is going to disappear. How do you feel about it? And every day she has to dig herself out of that hole, which, okay, she has the discourse, she can answer back, but over time it is really tiring. And indeed, her market has been shrinking. So now, if you are in such a position, what matters at this stage is to think ahead and reinvent your job. So it could be you plus AI, or it could be you in areas where AI would not be allowed to go. So for instance, think about confidential transcripts, working with police, working with high senior executives, or where no machines will be allowed when it comes to those translations. But again, it's a different market, it's a different approach, and you're going to need to go through transition.
Yeah, yeah. And before we sort of move on to the jobs of the future discussion that we had, and we'll share with the viewers what we're talking about as a visual, I think you make some really salient points, right? Because one of the things I'm going to go out on a limb and say this because it's the way that Closing Delta does stuff, right? I don't think the hype matches the expectation, and the reason for that is we're being sold a narrative, okay? And that narrative is not translating into real world for a lot of people. Okay. Now I can quote stats like everyone else, but I think it was McKinsey's key stat, which was like 77% of AI companies starting a project don't get past pilot.
Yeah.
Right. So something fundamentally isn't working in the real world right now. I'm not saying it won't work in the future. These are baby steps, right? I remember Napster before Spotify. Okay, that's how old I am. But in terms of where things go, sometimes it's just about bridging from where you are to your next step, right? So one of the things I would say to people is if you don't know about AI, spend a couple of hours, watch a few YouTube videos, go on the YC Combinator channel, understand it in the essence of what it is, right? Like basics of prompt engineering and things like this. Because having an understanding of it does not mean that you need to be an expert in it, but certainly you are going to be influenced by it. There's no two ways. We are the last ever generation to not be working with AI, right?
Yeah.
Now, every single piece of work will be augmented with artificial intelligence. There is that's a given now with the amount of investment that's gone in. So let's jump to your point around jobs, and I'd just like you to talk us through this because I shared it with you, you loved it, and then I was like, well, I don't kind of get it, but you're like, no, I get it. So that's always good. One of us should get it. So let me just share my screen, and do you want to just talk us through this?
Yes, so it's a projection. I forgot who made it. You probably have it quoted.
Is Dario Armadi. This is from Claude's and Anthropic's owners. Yeah.
Yeah. So what you can see in the center relates somewhere to what you were talking about, that if you read internet, AI is everywhere, all the companies adopted it, full speed. That's not what reality is. And that's what the red circle or the red graph in the center shows. This is where today AI is. And then the blue one projects what AI could do in the future and the amount of work it could take on. Now, I think, those graphs, they're always important to assess in context. This is not saying that all the jobs in the areas of, for instance, business and finance, computer or math, that these are going to disappear. However, what this means is, back on your expression of being augmented, people working in those areas are definitely going to be exposed a lot more to AI than elsewhere. And you could even argue that some parts here are not covered in blue, but will also grow as mechanics increases its capabilities, because the software, as you mentioned, is developing at high speed, but the robots, all the mechanics with the robots is slower. So in 10, 15 years, you could also imagine that we will have areas where, for instance, manutention is heavy, that we would have robots doing the work for us instead of people having their back hurt and everything.
Mhm. And I think there's a crossover here as well, right? So if I'm looking at this graph, I'm reading it slightly different, which is if you're in sort of management consultancy within life sciences, where you are a specialist in legal, right? Your exposure is high. Okay.
Yep.
However, not being derogatory to any sort of job, but let's look at some of the more, basic jobs around, say, transportation, right? Or production or food serving. Yeah, I mean, I've seen a Tesla robot serving food, right? And it even has the joke where, like, if you don't pay it the money and take it away and pay it the money and take it away, it learns and then does the same thing when it's trying to hand you the coffee bag. Yeah, it's super clever. So robotics we'll cover in a totally separate call. I think it's a huge area. Some of these things I'll turn around and say, well, if I trained as a lawyer, I don't want to become a gardener. I might do, but that's what this graph is saying to me, right? And this is where I think a lot of the social contract is breaking within people's frame. Because if I've studied for, say, medicine, or I've studied for becoming a lawyer, and that knowledge work is suddenly being impacted, um, you know, this is problematic. But then I was at a conference 3 weeks ago for the HSBC breakfast, right, in Oxford. And we had a lady called Kerry who went on stage, and she said, well, it's fine to augment it, right, the legality of it, but you wouldn't hang your hat on it. It still needs that legal professional to say, yes, this contract is correct, and you are still covered for your liability, right? So I feel that we will go faster. Necessarily, the velocity is what everyone is chasing with AI, but we could be going faster in the wrong direction on a lot of these things.
Yes.
So how can we help people? How can we help companies not go fast in the wrong direction? You rather kind of go slow in the wrong direction than still be able to get back home. I just have this feeling that people go, right, we're going to get rid of all agencies. We're going to do this because, Klarna did that and this company did this. You're not them. So
yeah,
where is that distinction?
I think there's a lot of common sense, but common sense you can't spread or teach, right? It really depends on individuals, and we're more talking at scale here. Some companies, we see it, and I think there's always fashions and swings. Some companies are seeing AI as the saving grace and the tool that will avoid all the management issues, the human interactions which are dysfunctional, and everything will be in order, everything will be answered in happy days. That's a myth because of different reasons. But if you even think of the structure of AI by essence, we keep on think of saying that AI thinks. It's an abuse of language. AI computes. It doesn't think. We think. We humans think. So now, if you think of computing, even though, again, the technology makes everything accessible, there's still which data do you put in? So it can be databases, but it can be you querying something. Is your question the right question or not? And then there's the answer that will be provided. And then there's what you do with the answer. If you think in terms of legal terms, for instance, for the time being, there's no legal framework for an AI to invent something and then that thing would belong to whom? to the AI, to the owner of AI, to humanity, as you said, or so there are things which are humans which will come around AI. And then you really need to still have people to look at the outcome of what's being produced. Because ultimately, whether it's your company or yourself as a person, you remain accountable of your actions or legally speaking. So don't just follow blindly. The AI is not a cult. It is, as we said earlier on, it is something to augment us, to make us get to answers faster, but that implies you need to know upfront what to ask, and you need to know what you want to do with that answer. And that's still human beings leveraging that capability.
I agree. I agree totally. And I think this is the bit where, I was speaking, was it in February, at the Royal Society of Medicine. We had a whole range of students in the audience, and everybody had a level of fear when it comes to AI. But I spoke about first principles, and I said, well, as long as you're learning first principles, you're the final check on what that AI is spitting out is, whether it's true, false, hallucination, made up, what So I think the critical thinking is the thing that we need to get right here. So I'm going to kind of stop sharing this, and because I just want to see your lovely face at full screen. But in terms of where, I guess we can look at two things, right? We can look at societal impact, which I think we've looked at here in a little bit more detail. But what can we do to support people in this transition, right? Because for me, when this conversation took place, again, 2 days ago, somebody said, artificial intelligence is as big as the invention and the revolution as of splitting the atom. That's a massive statement, okay, to make. And I thought, well, is it bigger than the internet? Is it bigger than, and then I thought, well, humans have this incredible ability of evolving, adapting, and surviving, regardless of all the threats to civilization that we keep getting on tweets. But that is the thing that I would really want to delve into, is where can we support people who want to use artificial intelligence to better themselves, right? To improve in certain aspects. Because I think there is a huge opportunity. I agree. I think AI is one of the biggest things to happen in certainly my lifetime. And I was there at the dot-com crash, right? So I know, right, what happens both sides of the divide of, where we didn't have cloud computing and it came in, and then we had the internet, and then we had faster websites, and then we had, do you remember 56 kilobyte downloads? When it meant when you're logging into the internet, and if you picked up the phone at the same time, you could hear it, right, when you're having the conversation. Okay, so this is not that long ago, right? I'm only 43, guys, like, just so we're clear. But that is the same moment. I feel we're in that germination stage with AI. Remember, ChatGPT only came out 3.5, 4 years ago, not long. It's still a toddler. What happens when it becomes a teenager?
Yeah. I mean, I would say three things. I would say be lucid, dare, and keep the human touch. So being lucid, if we look back, I also have my share of gray hair. When computers arrived, and I mean Microsoft and the likes, I remember all of the news was nobody will have a job anymore. There will be a computer where you used to be 50. There's going to be one of you because the computer will do it all. Look where we are now. We're still all there, and we're working with a computer, and we're working differently. So the jobs did not all vanish. And in being lucid also, it's, look at where you stand today, what you have, and what you could do. The word, luckily for us, we're not in a place where everything is collapsing around us. We're still in a home, comfortable, with a coffee machine and everything we need. Our kids are going to school. So there's no reason to panic. and there is still time for you to plan if you are going to be on that AI move. So just be lucid. Don't anticipate that in 10 years the world will be pink. We are today, and take it from there. There is about, again, you're going to be surprised how accessible this is and by all what exists. So find a topic you like and look what's available AI wise on that topic and start there. Start with something really that you can relate to. You're going to be surprised by how easy it is to use what's available and the fact that there are things available you would not have thought of. And then the last part with the human touch, I think, is equally important because we've seen, or let's say we have more years of social media, and we've seen the impact this can have on the psychology of people, and that's not just a good thing.
Yeah.
When I hear that some people are finding ChatGPT as their friend or even their virtual lovers, or that does worry me. And I watched a very interesting interview of Simon Sinek, and he was sharing that as he discussed with psychologists, something super interesting came out. AI, because again, it's a machine, so there's math, there's rules behind. It is programmed to go along with you. You might ask it to challenge you here and there, but 80% of what he will say will be compliant and going in your direction. And even if he tells you not so much, he will be extremely polite and building upon what you've said. The beauty of life and human relationships is that I am not in your head. So I have no clue how you're going to react to what I say, what you think for real. Are you with me, not with me? You could be angry, you could surprise me. And if it's not another person, life will surprise you. So wanting to solely interact with machines, this is a false sense of control and comfort because you live. So life will come at you. So don't lose that human touch. And it is also what makes it interesting that we actually we are not in everybody's heads. We have enough with our own, and interacting and growing. That won't come from AI. And I would add one last thing. If you look at people who age a lot, like over 100 years old, or one of the components is social link. Having friends, having interactions, that's a huge component of aging well and being happy. So
yeah, I think we can quote the Harvard study, can't we? That happiness is down to community, and I think and belonging. There is no discussion on that from my perspective. So I'll give you my thoughts on what you said. So the first thing is my kids don't have mobile phones. And what I mean by that is they have a phone, it's a dumb phone. It's the same phone that I grew up with, which is like a 3210, right? But made for the modern version with a USB-C. Yeah. And the reason for that is when I look at how the elite, for example, school their children, very few of them allow them just to constantly be on devices. Okay. They have almost like a Montessori style bringing up, like go outdoors, spend time, communicate, learn how to speak, interact with people, build resilience through sports and, all these kind of things. So I think that's super, super important. And those are life skills, right? Which AI can't teach you. I also have a feeling that AI, when it goes along with you, is like a yes person in a boardroom. As a leader, if everybody agrees with everything I say, I worry. Okay. Because the whole point is to have like a critical person to be able to bat ideas off. Ultimately, yes, it's my decision, but that, that conversation of challenging and maybe changing certain aspects, that I think is missing because you're one-to-one with the AI in most instances. I don't think we do group AI stuff right now. Okay. And also you're limited by your limitations. And what I mean by that is if your average IQ is below 100 and you are then using AI, it is spitting out something which is there. Then I meet somebody who's really good at it, who's really clever at using those prompts, and the output is totally different, right? So I speak about multimodal prompting, which most people don't do. They prompt it once and they go, okay, like, yeah. But you could ask the same question in a Socratically 3 different ways, and it will give you a deeper and deeper and deeper answer, right? So you could ask it something as basic as, what's the meaning of life? It'll give you like a statement. Okay, you don't have to agree with it, but like then you go, okay, now look at it from Jung's perspective or Kant or okay. And this is where I think it gets super interesting, because it's like having a library. You can constantly read every book, but you're not going to read every book. Okay, but then the book that I read you didn't read. Does that make me more intelligent than you on that particular topic? Not really. You could just go and read that book. So it's superficial knowledge as opposed to deep knowledge. And the deep knowledge comes with experience. It comes with getting stuff right and certainly getting stuff wrong. Okay. And my worry with something like AI is when businesses make decisions based off hype, okay, which is what I call newsworthy, but not on fundamentals of market, i.e., what their balance sheet is showing, right? What they do is they follow what I call the Twitter moment, right? So when Twitter fired 80% of their staff and they go, right, we're going to make it work with 20%, a lot of tech companies followed in that space, regardless of whatever their business model was. And some of them suffered through it massively. It wasn't just simple. They had to go and rehire those people at double the money. Yeah. So there is there's something fundamentally sort of broken there. In terms of companionship, I worry. I think the AI companion is probably one of the worst things. If you're thinking about population, when I think it was Musk who said population collapse is the #1 problem that we're going to have as a society. If we're spending all of our times with machines and it's telling us how wonderful we are, and I could give her a real anecdote, but I don't want to name the person. She was sitting next to me at one of the conferences and she goes, well, my ChatGPT boyfriend agrees with me and my husband disagrees. What do you think? I was like, which one are you paying $20 a month for? I would agree with me, right? No, but I'm very like that. But in terms of if you gave a portfolio, so say for investment seems to be a really big space, right? People want to use it for investing because they think they're suddenly financial traders. So they did this test. They gave a 10 million portfolio to an AI, okay? And they said, go make your bets. First 3 months, it was doing brilliantly well. By month 9, it was bankrupt. Because it has this self-learning confidence. And then the fact is that if it gets it wrong once, it's over for it. But in its sense, it just goes, oh, sorry. You're like, yeah, but you can't do that in life, right? So, you are right, or you are correct, or this wasn't quite right. So I think the jellyfish case was the one that really stood out to me for ChatGPT, where 13 references were correct, but the last one was wrong. And it just had made up the last one because it wanted to be right against the professor. Okay. Yeah. So this sort of stuff, I think, is still evolving massively. I believe, and I'm going to make a prediction now, I think mobile phones will be the next thing to go in the next 2 to 3 years. And even, do you remember the pin when it came out a couple of years ago and everybody went, oh, I want to get one of these pins. It's got, I don't need a phone, I can speak to it and all this. Yeah. That same technology got bought by HP. But when Johnny and I kind of moved across to OpenAI with Sam Altman, his first job, the guy who built the iPhone design, his first job is probably going to be building an AI, which you just wear, right? And you have your hands free. Okay, now suddenly the world changes again because you're not doing this on the train, which is like my absolute pet hate, right? Because I just sit there and I'm just looking at people like that on the train constantly. So I think it will evolve again. Yeah. So that's enough of my sort of predictions. I believe mobile phones will cease to exist in the next 3 to 4 years because of the fact that AI will be embedded, right? So your hands are free to do other stuff. Okay. We're seeing that with Ray-Ban glasses and all this stuff from Meta as well. Yeah. Have you got them on? Are you taking a picture?
Not yet. I'm still with the good old glasses.
Right. You heard it here first. Rachel, let's speak a little bit about how you're supporting people, because I'm keen to understand that for the audience, and then I'll explain why that conversation at lunchtime has led to this moment today.
Sure. Well, I mentioned my company has 3 pillars, right? So when it comes to consulting and operational excellence, there's always an element of automation involved, whether it's to scale your company, whether it's because you're transforming, you need to be more efficient, whatever the root cause is. Now, it can't just be a tool. It has to be a tool in light of what you want to achieve with the people working on it. And so there's a whole transformation, which there again, you need to glue all the aspects of a topic together. And AI alone, thinking that I think anybody who worked in corporate has seen for the past 50 years the big IT programs who would solve for a piece, and we're still there arguing. So AI is just another tool, better, faster, different, but has to fit in. Then it comes to stress management. And stress management, we alluded to it. AI is not only generating hope and happiness among people. What I've noticed is whether we're talking to young generations or more of ours, the 50 and plus years old, there is stress at every age for different reasons, but people do worry. So being able to come back to, okay, this is what I can do, this is who am I, and I'm going to reinvent myself, or I'm just protected from this and I'm going to find my ways to still live in the world we're in and evolve with it. That I think is very important. Keeping your mind at peace, not pretending that this is not happening. This would not be real. We're not here to create gaps, but how are you going to deal with the situation? Because AI is not going away, as you said. Yeah. So if this is causing stress to you, then you probably need to work on yourself and change, because it's here to stay. And then the last part where I help people is to create their own company, because what I've noticed is when executives leave a corporate, they have lots of competences, but they've been evolving in a structured environment, and often with teams or at minimum colleagues, which would also provide that structure. And when it's you facing yourself in the mirror, it's not always a given that you have the discipline, you know what to do. There's definitely areas as you build a company that you have never been exposed to as you were an employee. Yeah. So having help when you start, and I think that gives you a head start, basically,
Yeah,
when you lean on professionals.
I agree. I mean, I'll give you my own personal journey, right? So I built Closing Delta 6 years ago, and I came out of a corporate environment of 20 years, right? And that includes GSK, Novartis, and Boehringer Ingelheim, right? And one of the bits that everyone has imposter syndrome, and I need everyone to understand this. Yeah, like when we started this discussion, it was just a punt, right? I got to a point where I thought, I want to give this a go and let's see what happens. Yeah, we're 6 years in. But the first year was really good, right? We grew fast. We grew to about 6 people post-COVID. Then there was 22 months of no real movement, no real work. And me and my wife sat back and we're going, right, is this really happening, or do you just go back to a job? And and that will happen as well. There's a feeling that when you don't really have the skill set, tool set of an entrepreneur, you have to go dark, right? You have to go in monk mode. You have to learn really the hard yards, and I think you can save them a lot of that grief. The other bit I found was the people you thought who would give you business.
Yeah, not necessarily.
And the people you thought who would never give you business have given some of the biggest contracts. So I think the interesting thing is you have to put your preconceptions aside. Yes. You have to understand the buck stops with you a little bit, right? Like, and you have to go back to that. But the value that you can bring and the lifestyle that you can make for yourself, certainly with fractional working, and I'm speaking about this on the 4th of June in London, at the Connexion event, right, with people who do this, 150 odd people we're expecting. A lot of people like the romanticism, yeah, of fractional work, or even going out on their own, yeah, because who doesn't want to like build their own tuck shop and sell stuff in Monte Carlo, right? Like, yeah, absolutely. But it's hard. That's the thing I think we need to communicate. What can we do to make it easier is to know that people who've done it before, what's worked, what's not, what are your non-negotiables, how can you continue to do what you do? And here's the thing, not everyone's an entrepreneur. Yeah. So you might actually be better off in a different job doing a different thing. I said this to somebody at Roche when I was there in Basel. I said, what makes you think that you need a corporate role? You love dogs, become a dog walker. Because like ultimately life is about enjoying whatever it is that you're looking to do. And I see so many people follow their passion, right? I've got a guy at GSK, very, very senior. I said, what do you want to do? He goes, I want to be a baker. I want to bake with my son. That's it. I'm not going to tell you who it is. I can just tell you it's very, very, very senior. Now, that is exactly what I want people to use this moment for. When things are like this in the world, introspection, reflection, taking a break, looking up, understanding there's a sky, there's a God, whether you're an atheist or whatever, there's a force bigger than us, above us. Understand that. And that's not AI, okay? Right? That's what I would love for people to understand, because I think what you offer is a fast start to where they want to kind of get to. And in no world have I ever met someone who is so willing to give, right, time, investment, effort than our industry. I think our industry is amazing at jumping on a 15-minute call if you've got a issue. Like you just jumped on and given me an hour of your time to do this podcast. There's no straight return on investment. I'll tell you that for nothing. For a lot of people who just think we do this one thing and it works. No, we do 100 things, maybe do 1,000 things that don't work. Okay. And then we kind of make it work. Okay. And strategic partnership, super important, and that's why I'm really looking forward to our partnership, because I think that there is something here which, apart from everything I love in Basel, and I might move there at some point, watch out for that note, all right, next week with Devraj. But in terms of what's your sort of final thoughts on this, Rachel? Because we've gone a really long way around from the moment of initial discussion of the macro situation to now the microcosm of what people are suffering. Suffering is the word I use because they're suffering inside, they're suffering on the outside, but they're keeping a brave face. A lot of people I speak to about AI. So I'll stop there because I could talk for the whole podcast, but I'm going to pass it over to you.
I think I'm a strong believer that we can do a lot more than we think, provided that we allow ourselves. So I guess if you're asking for a last word, I would say it starts from you. And if you're deeply uncomfortable, there are ways to find your balance again, because that discomfort will get in your way at some point in time. So start with you, work on yourself, and then trust that you will be able to do whatever you're dreaming of. Because as long as you have the right people around you, the right method, the right mindset, the right energy, it might take time, but it will happen and it will be extremely satisfying. Plus, in the far end, as you said, there will be moments which are harder than others, but you will come out of it stronger and better than you are today. So it's all worth it.
I love that. I love that message of hope. And all I would say to you is I would leave you with this. So chairman of Blue Deal International is a friend of mine called Kamlesh said. And when I was struggling to get work, he gave me the airline analogy. Okay, and this is what he said. He said the plane's empty, the seat is going for £1 on Ryanair. Sell the seat at £1. get yourself the experience, get yourself that, check in the box in terms of working and showing what you can do. Because that £1 can become £10, can become €100, can become $1,000, whatever. By the time this plane is full, that final seat, which was the exact same seat at the start, could be £10,000. Right?
Yeah.
And that mentality, I would love for people to understand. When you're starting out, it is hard. It is meant to be hard, right? Yeah. Okay. But with the right support, with the right help, and with the right mindset to it, you can be successful. The world is plenty big. There's 1 billion people on LinkedIn. 1% are creators. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav.